Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. Um, For our start, I want to give a special thank you to Brian and Blake and Heather, who couldn't be here today because we had to force her to go home because she was sick. I want to thank you guys for trusting me and challenging me throughout my 4 years here. Mainly for trusting me in leadership position, for giving me the opportunity to see Bonner not just on campus, but the national network. Okay. So this is one of my all-time favorite quotes. It's by Muhammad Ali. Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. And this is something that I truly believe in. So my Bonner journey started in high school. And today I know it's about capacity building, but I don't really fit in any one of the categories that they have listed here. So I chose to go today. Okay. So I will start. My decision to attend the University of Richmond remained the best and most important decision I have ever made. When I made a choice to attend UR in April of 2013, it was primarily because of Bonner. 48 months later, this university has not just altered the way I think about life, it has fundamentally reshaped my awareness. The Bonner Network has played a pivotal part in enhancing my awareness about public service and civic engagement. Since my first interaction with a group of Bonners from the College of New Jersey in high school, I knew I wanted to be a member of the community that collectively believes in social justice, community building, diversity, civic engagement, international perspective, and spiritual exploration. I didn't know that placing values on each of the beliefs I just mentioned would result in a challenging adventure that at times have tested my moral compass. Frankly speaking, as a first-year student, I thought my Bonner work would be just about giving back to the community through service and trying to make the world a slightly better place by giving back my time. Boy, was I wrong. Making the world a slightly better place still matters. It really does. After a year of exploring social justice issues in Richmond and nationally through our first-year capstone, I learned to reflect and participate actively. For me, Bonner is about psychologically challenging yourself to reflect upon your awareness and engagement. It all started for me fall semester of my sophomore year. I was chosen to go to Bonner Congress, where two representatives from over 75 schools that Bonner is at get together to talk about moving the national network forward and create ideas. So the theme of the weekend was Be a Spark. So after that weekend, I kept contemplating, it's like, what is my spark? What do I want to do? And luckily for me, in spring semester of sophomore year, I was able to take a class, Justice and Civil Society. And shout out to Professor Dago. He really pushed us that semester. And in the middle of a quiz for my class, my justice class, I was trying to make sense of affirmative action as an equalizer and wondering how I can accurately articulate my position on a debate galvanized by Michelle Alexander's book, The Neon Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. Here I was surrounded by incisive classmates who come from every walk of life and bring with them countless of experiences. I sat in the midst of them as a child born during the peak of the Liberian Civil War, who immigrated to the United States to live in a neighborhood where the sound of gunshots were as frequent as postal mail service deliveries. I had plenty of writing. At the time, I had plenty of writing to do, but I couldn't concentrate. I had to go to my Bonner service site in 3 hours to mentor students from the north side of Richmond. I was forced to concentrate just in order to finish my quiz at the time. When I arrived at my service site that day, all I wanted to do was have a discussion with my mentees about their neighborhood and whether they knew anyone who has been incarcerated or is currently incarcerated. So in order to lighten up the mood, I shared my story of a couple of friends and family members that I know who got trapped in the system and was arrested. And that that moment, they began to realize, well, he's just like us. So they started sharing their stories. We went back and forth. What resonated with me also resonated with the scholars because we both, where I came from, I could relate to them in the environment they were growing up in. Okay, so there's a picture of me. I think this was last year, mentoring my students. I kind of have like 5 different groups since I've been there over my 4 years. My sophomore year, because the program starts from 5th grade to 8th grade, so I had 8th grade as my sophomore year, and they graduated, and they're in high school now. I still keep in contact with them. And the picture on the right is a career fair that I actually helped coordinate it, just so the students can get an experience outside of their school of what they could possibly do once they grow up. So I grew up in the West End neighborhood of Trenton, New Jersey, where majority of my former classmates are either high school dropouts, incarcerated, or a couple of them died right after high school due to gang violence. Growing up in Trenton, my classmates and I always assumed that learning in an open space classroom and witnessing someone get arrested was like the status quo. It was basically like the norm. So when I first went into Henderson and saw how like that building, that classroom was not divided by walls, but by dividers, it kind of resonated with me. And, I had a flashback of my middle school because that's just how my middle school was. And we always knew that at least one of our classmates would get arrested. Can you imagine that, growing up, being in middle school and thinking about, well, you have 20 people in your class, at least 1 or 2 might be going to jail, or you might lose them by the time you guys are 24. At the time, I didn't really understand why people was getting in trouble, because I was fortunate enough to have a stable family. I was in after-school programs, and then I was always involved with the church, so I had my church family to support me, which I took for granted. Because I had stability along with a great support system, I expected children in my neighborhood to avoid gang-related activities and beat the odds if they could possibly just work hard in school. That's what people always say. Like many Americans, I failed to understand how lucky I was. Not only did I fail to understand and recognize how privileged I was to have stability in my life growing up in the neighborhood I grew up in, I also branded those who couldn't avoid going to jail or dropping out of school liable for not beating the odds. My story is a case in point. I wasn't conscious of my privilege nor the responsibilities that came with it. We need to be conscious of our privileges and how we can best use our privileges. For me, it is doing all I possibly can to keep a young man or woman from being a victim of mass incarceration through mentoring. Another quote that I hold dearly is what Desmond Tutu once said: if you're neutral in a situation of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Just let that sink in. This quote completely summarized my journey as a Bonner. Being conscious of my privilege is not just the first phase of resistance against unequal distribution of power to dismantle the system of institutionalized privilege and oppression. The second phase of resistance against inequality requires selfless decisions and actions, which I think is the hardest. In one of my many write-up reflections, I wrote about the complexity of the second phase of resistance against unequal distribution of power. In my write-up reflection, I talk about meritocracy and inequality within the education system. I wrote in one of my reflections, it is heartbreaking to witness one of my brilliant scholars at higher achievement, who always did his assignment on time and followed instructions, not given the opportunity to attend one of the magnet high school in the Richmond area. I was personally disappointed and frustrated over the rejection of his first choice and him being waitlisted for his second choice. I have witnessed over the past 2 years his dedication and passion for learning, and the fact that he will be attending a school that won't challenge his intellectual capability is a form of oppression. I'm sure that the heartbreaking story of my scholar wasn't just an isolated incident, but one that was a blatant reality for many impoverished children, not just in inner city, but across America. I was heartbroken when my scholar came up to me and said, "They don't think that I'm good enough for Matthew Walker Government School." It is sad that the only way low-income student like my scholar can have access to modern education is by applying to magnet school or school out of their neighborhood. The lack of resources, be it books, teachers, just a classroom where the climate is just right and the environment is just right, like the University of Richmond, a lot of students don't have that. In the same reflection, I wrote about the danger of encouraging students to leave public school and attend magnet school or private school. So I was kind of contradicting myself. On one hand, I wanted my students to have the best education possible. On the other hand, I started thinking, why are we encouraging students to leave that neighborhood school to go seek another school that might be helpful for them? And in that, what I came to the conclusion was that we inadvertently proclaim that if you attend traditional public school, you're not guaranteed success. Instead of changing an equal distribution of institutionalized privileges and oppression, we are conforming to it by taking the smartest students out of traditional public schools that otherwise will have positive impact on what is known as standardized testing. It is important to recognize that each of us contribute to the system of institutionalized privilege and oppression, either as an advocate or a complicit bystander, be it whether you choose charter school, private school, wherever your decision may be, you need to think about it thoroughly before you advocate for it. I'm constantly wrestling with how I can lessen the subordination of orders through my decisions and actions. We need to ethically maximize our privilege by being accountable for our action and decisions. What I mean by this is to speak up and take action whenever you see injustice or inequality happening, be it at a workplace, in your community, or on the metro. Over the summer, when I was interning at the Congressional Hunger Center, we used to have a TED Talk discussion at least once a week. During one of our TED Talk discussions, we started talking about privileges. And one of my coworkers, she's a female, she brought to my attention something I have never thought about. The first thing she said that she started talking about catcalling and how every time she come up on the metro, there's always someone catcalling her. And I've never thought about that. It's like, that's ridiculous. Like, I don't feel like women should have to go through that. That's something from the men's perspective that I have never experienced. And another thing she talked about was during the summertime, how companies and workplaces tend to amp up the air conditioning because men want to wear suits like what I'm wearing right now and go to work. But then women have to deal with that. And that's something as a man I have never thought about. So just being aware of these different privileges that you may have that other people may not have, and think about that and how you can step up and say something about that or take action against that. So being at the Bonner Foundation my sophomore year, I was able to do some capacity building work, creating curriculums for the larger Bonner network for students to do fundraisers at other Bonner schools. Like, we're fortunate enough to have a great Bonner system here that allowed us to do whatever work that we want to do. Other Bonner schools doesn't have the resources that we have, be it transportation and just the amount of support staff that we have here within the CCE. And then this is during the 25th anniversary. Like, I love being around Bonners because they're constantly smiling. And even though you're doing work that may seem dreadful to others, like, there's a lot of passion behind it. And once you see a banner, you introduce yourself to a banner, they always brighten your day. As you see here, that was during late night session. We were just discussing stuff that goes on in our community and just sharing similar experiences. And there's Brian and Blake in the back. And then we always work hard, but we play harder. So it's like, you got to lighten it up sometimes. And this is the staff that I work with over the summer at the Congressional Hunger Center. My Banner experience have taught me the necessity for awareness and personal understanding in the fight against injustice. Being aware of your existing privilege is an essential part of capacity building. You cannot make changes unless you're aware of what other people are going through. I have witnessed incredible act of altruism firsthand from the staff at the Banner Foundation to the advocacy work that I did over the summer with the Congressional Hunger Center, just fighting for students to have meals during the summer. Like, a lot of students are on free or reduced lunch in the inner city, and over the summer, because they're not in school, that they're not provided meals during lunchtime. So over the summer, we was working to encourage Congress to pass a law that would help them, that would help after school programs and summer school programs provide lunch for students. And I really cherish the work that I did there over the summer. And being at these organizations, they all have taught me that sustainable and effective change required a devoted coalition of people to solve society's most intractable problems. Some of my Banner experiences are difficult to articulate. Those moments just lingered on the periphery of my conventional language. So I always say that Banner love means that you put others before yourself. And once you meet a Banner, if you engage in a 2-minute conversation with them, they will give you a perspective that you have never thought of before. So my challenge to the class of 2017 and to everyone in here is to just think about your privilege and be aware of it and try to maximize your privilege. So if you know that if you see oppression occurring somewhere, or if you see injustice going on, you can always speak up or take action. Like, a small action will go a long way. Thank you.